listening to Marvel Talk with JT. And here's your host, JT.
Welcome back to another episode of Marvel Talk with JT. I am your host, JT, and today we are going to be talking about episode 4 of Daredevil Born Again, titled Sic Semper Systema. This one was an episode where a lot of things have happened, and honestly, it may be the weaker of the three, in my opinion. However, that doesn't mean that it's a bad episode. So we're going to go ahead and get into my thoughts and opinions. Then we'll do a spoiler talk, and then we'll hear what the people think. So episode 4 starts off with basically the repercussions of what happened to Hector Ayala after he was brutally murdered at the end of episode 3 by a crooked cop wearing the Punisher logo. And I called it in episode 3. I said I don't believe this was Frank Castle because I don't think Frank would be the one to do that. I don't think he would be the one to be, shooting vigilantes for nothing. He has to have a reason. We learn that, we don't really learn because we've already been introduced to her, but Hector's niece, Angela, I believe her name is, Angela Ayala, comes to the morgue where Matt and the mortician was talking, and she kind of is like, hey, this needs to be fixed. Like, these cops can't be doing this. They need to be, like the vigilantes need to be protected. There need to be someone to kind of make things, right. And obviously Matt's not going to tell her, hey, I am Daredevil, I will make it right. He's not going to say that. But what I think this kind of does is this kind of gives you a, hey guys, look, let's introduce you to this young girl who most likely probably could potentially be the next White Tiger. And you now get to see this reemergence of the White Tiger, mantle. And I do believe, I know for a fact in the comics, she does become the White Tiger. So she's a younger girl. Could she potentially be in the Young Avengers, the Champions, whatever they're going to call themselves in the MCU, along with Miss Marvel, Kate Bishop, Stature, all the younger characters that we have? Possibly. That would be awesome. That wasn't, someone who I thought would be included in that, cast, but hey, I'm all for it. I am all for it. Bringing back a mantle that we only got to see not even a full episode of, honestly. So that's an interesting little take. You can tell in this episode, I've mentioned it before, but this entire show, Daredevil Born Again, went through rewrites, reshoots, just everything. It went through the whole productive and producer overhaul. And with that being said, there are still elements from the older version in these episodes. You can kind of feel in episode 3, episode 2, episode whatever. Not episode 1. Episode 1 I know for a fact was completely new. Episode 2 and 3 were actually supposed to be 1 and 2. I think I mentioned this in my previous episodes. But anyways, this episode by far you can tell is the just straight up from it's almost like they put the two ideas together. And I mentioned this on my social media accounts. You can tell there's a big switch in episode vibes right in the middle. You have the beginning of it where it's very much Matt trying to do good by the people and take another case, but gets ridiculed for his disability. And he tries his hardest to help this guy who is just down on his luck. He's continually doing petty theft, petty crimes, and he's just trying to help him out. You get Wilson Fisk, who is still doing his mayor stuff, but he's going through it with kids choirs and Latvia's choirs. He's doing a lot of things. which is fine. I wanted more from this episode, and as it was going, I was like, okay, we're getting into one of those episodes where it's going to be lower on my scale. And then we get to the middle of the episode where it completely flips, and we get more of the Netflix vibe of it. Then we end the episode on a very the way that I said it was both Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk are they have this itch that needs to be scratched, and at the end of this episode, you get to see that itch kind of being scratched at a little bit. But we do end the episode with finally getting to see Muse. And if you don't know who Muse is a serial killer who uses his victim's blood as graffiti art. And we've seen graffiti art all over New York right now. So to say the fact that he's in this and he's making a huge contribution to the artwork of New York, yeah, we might want to watch out for this guy. He's a little bit crazy. So that's kind of the vibe of it, the episode that we got in a very quick rundown. My thoughts are still the same. It was lower on my end until we got to the last 20 minutes of this episode, and then it really kicked up for me. I think for me, honestly, it was probably like a 7.5, 7.5 out of 10. Still good. IMDb has it at 8.5 out of 10, so it's pretty solid. Now we're going to get into spoilers, so if you have not seen the episode, you can click away now and come back later, whatever the case may be. But this episode, we finally got to see the boy. We finally got to see our man. Frank Castle is back, the Punisher. That is where we get the flip. That moment where Matt is going to see where he lives or where he's staying to find Frank Castle. That is when we get to see the flip in the episode where it becomes the tone becomes darker and grittier. And the dialogue between John Bernthal and Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock and Frank Castle, respectively, is some of the best in this series, in this show so far, that I was just... I was sitting up at full attention, just listening to every word they said. And there's a part of the dialogue that I want to share with you guys that I think is important. Frank is basically telling Matt, why didn't you kill Bullseye for killing your friend? And Matt was like, I needed to do justice. And Frank kind of is edging him on and is like, hey, what happened? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And Matt yells out, he got life. Like life in jail. And Frank uses that word life as not as a sentencing, but he says, well, what about Foggy? Did he get a life? We know Foggy's dead. So he's using that saying okay, cool. This guy who killed your friend is still alive, breathing your air that you also breathe. But Foggy's not. Foggy doesn't have a life anymore. And I just thought that was poetic. It was just incredible to hear that dialogue. And then we move more into how Fisk is doing. And Fisk and Vanessa are going into this couples therapy with Heather, who is the love interest of Matt, as we all know. And this is where it gets very interesting, because we all know that Vanessa had an affair with a guy named Adam. Well, we haven't seen Adam at all throughout the series, but we know Kingpin has been fidgety with his hands. We've seen the scratched up knuckles, meaning he's either been punching a wall or someone's face. And in this kind of therapy session, Vanessa kind of is like, yeah, what drew me closer to Adam was his hands. They were like artwork and da-da-da-da. And Fisk is very agitated with this. And then Heather asks and says, well, where is Adam? And they both go, I don't know. Well, we do know where Adam is, actually, because at the very end of this episode, very poetic, very cinematic, we get to see Wilson go down a stairwell while we see Matt go up one. Matt is going up to a rooftop to practice his Daredevil skills, to practice his with the batons and with the whips and stuff, and all this other stuff. And we see the different colored helmets, and it's really cool because we now know that, hey, Matt is still itching to be Daredevil again. He's got that itch, and like I said, he's gonna scratch it, I believe. But what Wilson was doing is he was going down the steps to a layer almost where he has a full dining room setup almost, and it's got a long table, very nice decor. He's eating. We've seen him eat very minuscule foods. I mean, like one egg with one asparagus. Like, it's very tiny. He's eating good, eating healthy. But then in front of him is like 4 bratwurst on top of like linguine. It almost looked like some kind of very, very heavy in carbs. And all of a sudden we see 2 hands come from a bar, like a jail, like in front of a jail cell almost. And here appears this beaten up, bloodied, old, just nasty looking man. And it's Adam. And we now know that Fisk has been like almost mentally torturing Adam. So it gets incredible. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we get to end the episode with Muse, and we know that Muse is carrying a victim of his, and the victim looks up and is still awake. Muse punches a syringe into his body and is starting to drain the blood out of him into this container. There is the blood for his graffiti work. It's insane. It is insane. Like I said, the last half of this episode was great. The first half, a little slower. On the slower side, and that is perfectly fine. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried more about, what's next. How does the story, continue? We do have some thoughts, like I mentioned. Pretty much what I just said, everybody kind of agreed on. Josh says episode 4 was a slow start, but still good enough. Or still good, though. But man, that whole scene with Daredevil and Punisher was off the chain. Felt like I was back watching the Netflix series. Couldn't agree more. I mean, seeing them have that dialogue was perfect, and I loved it. Some more people on Twitter was saying, can we get more of Daredevil and Punisher? Absolutely, and I think we will. Someone said poor. This made me laugh. Poor Adam. Question mark. Is Wilson Fisk letting him lick the plate after he's done eating? ... Wow. It's crazy to think, but he probably is. Honestly, he eats this full meal in front of Adam and then he makes him lick the plate. Like, how psychologically upset do you have to be? And like, how mentally draining is that? You're behind bars, you're getting beat up probably daily, and then this happens. And then the last thing I want to say is another person messaged me on Twitter and said, Muse looks awesome. The white, mask with the red eyes with the drips of blood looks insane. This person also goes on to say, White Tiger, aka Angela Ayala, needs to be with the Young Avengers. And like I mentioned at the beginning, guys, I wouldn't be mad at that. I really wouldn't. But guys, we are in store for a big treat next week because episodes 5 and 6, I believe, are released at the same time. Yes, that's right. Episodes 5 and 6 are going to be released next week. So like the first episode I did where we talked about 1 and 2, next week we'll talk about 5 and 6. We're getting straight into this series. I love it. It's been great, and I'm so glad that I'm able to cover it with you guys and talk to you guys about it. But if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like. Please share with your friends who like Marvel and want to listen. And also give a comment. We love listening to comments here and reading them. I know my good friend Alex commented on one with a couple of fire emojis, so I appreciate that, bud. But this has been JT with Marvel Talk with JT, and I will see you next week.